You're tuned in to Porch Talk with Rev Pat, where raw, real talk rules. So sit back and relax with that delicious cup of coffee or tea or your favorite glass of wine as Rev Pat delivers real, transparent, and raw conversations about all things life. Let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of Porch Talk with Rev Pat. I'm your host, Rev Pat, and I am so very blessed to have you with me on the porch today. Today, I am going to be talking to Allison Pena. Did I pronounce that correctly? I want to make sure I got that right. Okay. Pena. She already told me, and I forgot already. Pena. And she is AKA the Bad Widow, but we're going to get into that. On today's episode, we're going to talk about grief, how we deal with it, how others deal with it, how others deal with us. And this is very personal conversation for me. And I know that through talking with her, a lot of people are going to be helped. We're just going to have some open conversation, real conversation. And I'm going to give you a heads up why she's AKA the Bad Widow. Because she decided to be real honest about her feelings and her grief regarding the loss of her husband of 25 years. So grab your coffee, grab your tea, even a glass of wine, and let's get talking. Okay, Miss Allison, let's get talking about this. We've already had a little bit of a conversation, and as I shared with my audience, I am so honored to have you with me. And it is, as I thought about it this morning, I thought to myself, this is the perfect timing for me because I've had a couple of days of just grieving my mom who passed away in 2008. I also lost a sister in 2019. And I was feeling sort of overwhelmed about some things. And those are two people that I would normally pick up the phone and call and talk it through. So the last couple of days were pretty rough for me. So this topic, and I think, like I said, this topic is a needed topic because our whole nation went through, I believe, a season of grieving as we dealt with the pandemic in its early stages. I don't want to say it's gone. I just want to say at the time when we lost over 700,000 Americans to COVID, that meant to me, that translated, we had over 700,000, let's just think about it, families that grieved. And as we watched what went on, we watched young children lose both parents at the same time. It just was a lot. And we're talking about, so as I said to you, do you agree with me when I say we want to talk about grief, but grief has it in a whole? Because it doesn't have to be just the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a job, a loss of a relationship. Grief and mourning are just life, something that we're going to do in life. If you haven't lost a loved one, you've grieved or mourned over something that you cared about. But you in particular lost a husband of 25 years and cared for him for 11 months while he battled pancreatic cancer. I want to talk about, first of all, the burden of caring for someone with cancer, which is in itself is a lot. And I know that because of my sister. And I think we forget, a lot of people focus on the patient, and we oftentimes miss the fact that the caregivers and the family members also carry a burden. So I would imagine that, first off, that was difficult. And how did you handle that? And then I know you had to keep on doing everything else that was required as a wife. So how did you make that adjustment?
That was really hard. He was diagnosed in October of 2015, and he died September 10th, 2016. At home in my arms. And in between that time, he did chemo. And, gradually got weaker. He was 6'3". he went from 263 pounds to 146 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And there's a grieving of the person who's ill. You know, he lost his hair. He loved to ride city bikes around the city. I'm in New York. Mm-hmm. And so he had been told he'd lose his hair. And to kind of feel like he was in control of this, he went and he got a really short haircut. But a day or two after that, he got on the bike and he's riding the bike, and his eyelashes started coming off and cutting his eyes. And his hair started flying off his head. And he came home, he was heartbroken. And there was nothing I could do. Nothing. And that hopelessness, that wanting to do something, you know, we're designed where when we see someone in pain, we want to help. But I couldn't help with that.
So, you know, really, as you say that, as you share that, really he experienced a grief in the morning too, because he had to grieve and mourn the loss of his life as he knew it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How could you not? 1 minute you're active and you're doing the things that you love to do, and then all of a sudden that's taken away. Even if I cut my hair, feel like I'm in control. I've really not. It's just something I need to hold on to because I don't want to lose everything. And then to have to comfort him through that kind of thing. That's not something normal. That's not something that you are prepared to comfort someone about. You know, we think, or the normal person would think, well, it was his hair. But no, it was just another sign for your husband that things were not going to be the same. So as a wife, you're doing double duty. We already know as wives, we have a responsibility to care for our spouses. For those of you that don't feel that way, okay, we'll move around, just speed through this or something. But we already have the responsibility as caring wives to take care of our loved one, our spouses. But here you are greeted with something that's totally kind of above the call of duty. That's where you go, well, this is above my pay grade. I don't know what to do. Who do I call? What kind of support system did you have for you during those 11 months?
So the other thing that I just want to say to those caregivers out there is that the person who is grieving their loss, who's getting weaker, who's maybe not feeling well, who's sad and angry about the fact that they can do less, that their life is getting smaller than it was before. The person they lash out at is the caregiver, the one who won't walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really talk about that.
My sister did that with her husband. In other words, he would say she was just mean. And it takes something other than just the normal conversation to understand that. I took a class after my sister's death in her honor to learn how to minister to both the caregiver and the patient. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first things they addressed was how the patient will respond to those closest. And sometimes that was anger. And with my sister, she was very active. So I can understand her feeling way out of control because she was so accustomed to being in control. You know what I'm saying? So
totally.
I totally understand when you say, well, you were the first person to get the brunt of it. And you're like, okay, that's a bit much. How do you keep your sanity? I mean, I know I say that because you love them.
Yep.
You understand, but you're still human. you still have feelings. You still are trying to take all of this in yourself. It's not like, oh, well, you know, it's okay. I don't mind if you act like that with me. I understand. There had to be days when you were like, okay, brother, now.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there were days when I was like, I'm the one holding the ship together here. You might not want to like carve holes in the hull.
No, big going down. You might not want to take me off.
You might not want to sink this thing.
So, and I think that people, caregivers, need to hear you say that, because in all honesty, if you're going to survive it, and if you're going to keep the ship afloat, you're going to have to acknowledge that, okay, this is not all sweetness in life. Some days, yeah, I'm just as caring as I want to be. Other days, okay, let me take a deep breath. Let me put my big girl panties on, and okay, it's me and you, Jesus. Let's go on in there. So you did this for 11 months. Now, what was your, I cut you off and I apologize. No, what was your support system? What support system did you have for you? Because I ask you that because a lot of people believe, and my sisters and I think made this mistake also in the beginning. Yep. We were being a support system for her, and we almost forgot that my brother-in-law needed us to be there for him too. Whether he accepted the help or not, we needed to be his support system too.
Yeah, it's really hard. So while he was sick, I was creating this environment where he could work. He worked until the Thursday before the Saturday he died. And he played tennis, even when his balance was so bad that he stretched his length on the court. He would just fall, and then he'd get up and he'd keep playing. And the doctors were like, slow down, do less. And instead, what we decided was, why would we do that? Why would we not increase the things we loved, be around the people we loved, amplify our own love? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is a lot of it becomes about logistics. Did you get the milk? You know?
Yeah.
25 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And so some of the really important things go under the surface in the face of that. And what happens with grief and with a loss like this, including, loss of a job, loss of a home, anything you're grieving, is that what matters rises up to the surface. But for me, was really important for me to move the emotions through my body. Mm. So I did that with singing. I did it with writing. I did it with certain kinds of movement, with drums, because otherwise it was going to get stuck.
Right.
And stuck was not going to be a good thing. The other thing that I had to do was remind myself that I was not just a caregiver. I would not just be a widow. There were more facets to me. I was a woman. I was a wife, sister, daughter. So there are many many things that I am, many roles that I play. And when you're caring for someone and after you become a widow, it all narrows into that one. Yeah,
you become just you become just his caregiver, and you're like, okay, yeah, I am, but
that's not healthy.
That's not all of me. And then if I just let you make me just a widow, then you're putting me in a box that I really don't belong in. So now I get the bad widow, because the bad widow was like, well, wait a minute now. Okay. No, there's more to me, and there was more to me then. I think what the probably a good way to say that is we are what we need to be when we need to be that.
Yes.
And for women, we're good at that, because we are what we need to be when we need to be that. And what gets us stuck sometime is that we get caught up in the being that. And we forget the being who I am. So part of that, and that's very bold, because part of that grieving process, especially in a situation like yours, has to be one that says, okay, I love them, 25 years, good marriage. I will never not love him. But I too now have to, that other piece of me now also has to morph into another person, the other part of me, the part of me that I know he would, and I don't believe any one of our loved ones would not want us to go on and to live full lives. I really don't believe that. I know that if, like you said, your husband passed in your arms, I know when a loved one leaves this earth knowing that the full capacity of that spouse, that friend, that whomever, their full capacity of love for them was felt before they left here. I can't see a loved one not wanting us to live our lives fully. I know my mother would not have wanted that, and I know my sister would not have wanted that. Now, your husband passed in your arms.
Yep. And we had been practicing when we were scared, filling up with love.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was in my arms, and it was just the two of us at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, and he was worried about things. What about my mom? His mom is still alive. Mm-hmm. She'll be 99 in May. Mm-hmm. And I'm her primary caregiver. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that I now have a boyfriend. Wow. So it's complicated. And so so I was holding him in my arms, and he was saying, well, what about my mom? And what about my studio? He was a professional artist, left me with hundreds and hundreds of paintings, which is a lot. So we were talking about triggers before we got on. Mm-hmm. I am surrounded by my husband's legacy of work. Mm-hmm. And what I said to him is, in a body, you need breath and love. When you leave a body, all you need is love. Mm-hmm. So when you're ready, go out on the love. Mm-hmm. And he was literally in my arms and took 4 breaths and went out on the love.
Went out on love. That is so beautiful.
It was a gift. It was a gift.
My sister passed with all of my other sisters and her daughter with her. She was unconscious. And I was about to go and get my husband to come into the hospital room and pray for her. And the Lord said, no, you pray for her. And it was nobody there. It was just me, my other sisters, and her daughter. And at first I was like, I don't feel equipped to do that. I don't know why I had that thought. I just did. But I was obedient, and I went in the room and I closed the door, and I told my sisters, let's just pray for her. We're going to pray. I didn't know what I was going to say, Allison. I didn't. I just knew that's what he told me to do. And as I prayed, he just totally took over, and I heard come out of my mouth, it's okay, we're all here like we normally are. And if you're ready to go, you can go. Yeah. And I heard my niece just say, Mama, you can go, or something similar to that. Yep. And at the end of the prayer, we opened our eyes, and she was gone. Yep. And the weight of that did not hit me, I don't think, for about maybe a year of knowing that it was a gift to be there. It was a gift not to see her suffer or anything like that, and to be there with her, all of us together, which is something that we cherished our time. I have 4 other sisters. I have 4 sisters. and we cherished our time together as sisters. And after about a year, it made sense that the Lord wanted it that way, that he would want us there. He would want her to know that we were there with her and that we were okay letting her go. And that's another thing I think that many people don't kind of move beyond, because I almost got stuck in that moment. I almost got stuck right there. And part of the discussion about grief and mourning has to be like, you were able to have that conversation with my mother and with my sister. They were both unconscious. They never woke up. They were both unconscious when they passed. My anger came in the not being able to say goodbye, the not being able to hear my mother's voice before she left this world, my not being able, almost getting stuck in that same thing with my sister. Now, my anger didn't surface for a year. Can you believe it? With both my mother and my sister, with my mother, I just woke up in the middle of the night at like about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, sat both up in the bed. I know my husband thought I was losing my mind. And all in my mind, all I wanted to do was, and I'm not going, I wouldn't have done it, but it was in my head to do, was go out and scream. In backyard, in the middle of, just scream. Why did you take her? And I remember having to call a friend. And I just broke down and said, I'm mad. And then I went, oh my God, I just said I'm mad at God. Have you had those moments?
Absolutely. I mean, the first year was overwhelming grief. And I've heard this more than once from my clients, from other widows, widowers. The first year is kind of all the feelings, overwhelming grief. How do you put one foot in front of the other? How do you get out of bed? How do you do these things which used to be easy, and then suddenly they're not easy? And then the second year, first of all, in the second year, what happens very often is that everybody leaves. The people who've been checking in, their thought is, well, you're over it. It's been a year. And the fact of the matter is that you just woke up to the fact that that person is never coming back in that second year.
Man, let me tell you, what about let's not even talk about the year. Let's talk about everybody that's been there for the funeral and the homegoing and the planning and all the cards are coming and everybody's saying, anytime you need me, just reach out. And after the homegoing funeral, however you want to refer to it, crickets. Maybe for a good week. I'll give maybe a week. And then just crickets. And you're left alone. And you're left with that silence. You're left with that, well, what do I do? This was your spouse. So you had to go back to that house. For me, it was, I in no way wanted to go back to the home that I grew up in as a child without my mother there.
Well,
but we don't talk about this because you said it before we even came up. You said, we give this answer. How are you doing? And we say, fine. And really, we are not. We are shaken to our core. Our lives are, and I know you'll agree with me, your life is never the same.
Never the same.
It is never. Everybody else wakes up and gets to go back to work, gets to go back to school, all of that. And Monday is Monday for them. That's not the same for those of us who have lost loved ones. We get to wake up on Monday morning and Monday is never the same again, because the looming thought in your mind is that that person that you lost is no longer there. That habit that you had of maybe calling your spouse once you made it to wherever you were going, it's gone. Calling your mom on your lunch break, it's gone. Let me ask you this, because I did something, and I don't know if many people do this. I just want to ask you. It was hard for me to delete my mother's phone number out of my phone. And I have not yet deleted my sister's. What do you think about that? And my best friend had that question, you know, with her husband's phone number still being in her phone. I don't know why that's so hard for me. And she's been gone for 3 years. My mother, eventually, her phone number, the phone got shut off, so that wasn't even there anymore. But did you find those small things hard to do?
Really hard. Really hard. I mean, there were texts between us, photos between us on our phones. And so if I got rid of them, I would lose that.
Wow.
There was one time I remember when I just couldn't go home. My husband was this artist. He left hundreds of paintings. So he left me with a home and a studio to deal with. 500 square foot studio. 40 years of art.
Wow.
To find a way to do something with. And there was one day I went out and I just couldn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of walking in and breathing in my life with my husband in this place, and I couldn't do it. And so I went out to dinner and I went to a movie, and then eventually I was able to go home. And the next thing that I did, and I call these nets. So I kept having these things that would break down. Like I would forget to put my shoes on walking out the door. So at a certain point I had a sign next to the door, and one of the things it said was shoes. Seems like an obvious thing, but I got a block and a half in my slippers. And then I realized my heels were cold. But this particular day, I realized that I needed a small group of people that if I hit the wall the way I hit the wall that day, I could call up and say, look, can I just come over to your house? Sit me on the couch, go about your lives, maybe give me a cup of tea. You don't have to like do anything with me, but just let me be in a normal flow of life for a minute.
Wow.
And so the next day, after that day when I hit the wall, I called up 5 people and I said, would you be willing to be this person for me? And I don't know when this might happen. It might be at 2:00 in the morning. And these 5 people said, yes, if that happens, you can come. I only used it once, but it was an enormous comfort to have those people who had agreed to hold me when I was falling apart.
Now, that is, how many of us would think about that? I never would have thought about that. I never would have thought about having that kind, because I think you make the assumption that those closest to you are going to be that person. And that's nothing bad. I'll say that there's nothing bad. And if you're listening to this and you do have a friend or a family member that is experiencing grief, or if you are that person, show those around you some grace, because they really don't know what to say. They really don't know what to do. They don't. And I think we put a lot of expectations on people to do or to give more than they are capable of giving, not because they don't want to, but because this is such an area of life that we're not prepared for it when we find ourselves in it, and we're not prepared for it when we find others in it. My biggest thing with my best friend was to make sure that I didn't keep telling her what I did while my sister was going through. I didn't want her to feel as if I was trying to tell her how to handle it. That's not my right. I didn't have that right. But as a friend, I at times wanted to do it because I felt like it would comfort her, to help her to know I've been there and I've done that. And it was a really hard thing not to do as a friend. Now, I told you before we started, I had a double, it was doubly hard for me because as a minister,
yeah,
everybody expected me to know what to do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Everyone expected me to know.
Yeah, that's where Bad Widow came in. What I realized was that because we don't talk about what grieving really is, we talk about the things that are easy to talk about. We talk about the things there are resources for. Okay, there are people who can help you through that first grief, all the feelings. Those are grief counselors. Very often the church steps in and is really helpful with that. There are people who can help with letting go of stuff. And there are people who can help with finances. But what it's actually like to be in the middle of that. After my husband died, I discovered there was nothing for that. Mm-hmm. And that's when Bad Widow was born. And so I started just telling the truth about my experience. Just telling the truth, because what I realized was that they meant well and they had no idea what to say or do.
Yeah.
And so what would happen is they would say or do something that was not the right thing. And typically it's what they think that they would want if they were in your shoes, and they're not.
Right. And you're not.
So it's best guess, right?
Yeah. And I heard so many times, and I wanted to scream, and I wish I had the courage to do it. All of the time.
Yeah.
Well, you've got this, and you've got to be strong for everyone else. And, just pray. And I wanted to scream. I don't want to pray.
Right.
Yep. The pastor's wife just said that. I don't want to hear another scripture. I don't want to hear you know how I feel, because really you don't know how I feel. There were certain things I just did not want to hear. And in my head, I was screaming out loud. I don't want to hear that. That is not what I want to hear. What I want more than anything is to pick up the phone and hear my mother's voice. Yeah. What I want more than anything is to walk into church on Sunday and have my sister sit next to me.
Yeah.
And all the scriptures in the world will not make that happen. So can you just, almost there were days when I just didn't want any more phone calls.
Yep.
I didn't. And I wanted to talk to you about this, because I think those that are going through need to understand you're not alone. You're not alone. Yeah. Yep, we got those. We both, Allison and I can tell you, we got those comments. And yes, we wanted to strangle folk. And yes, we wanted to just go, can you please just shut up? Don't say it. If you don't, don't say that, because you don't know. And I got angry because right after my mother passed, we went to my husband's mother's home for vacation. And she lives in Iowa. And it was right after my mother passed.
Wow.
I was so pissed at him. He probably doesn't even notice. Oh, I'm glad he didn't. I hope he didn't. I was so pissed because I felt like, how dare you go visit your mother? And I just buried mine. I was, and then I had to realize he's not thinking about that, because his mother is still here, and we're going to have to go visit his mother, not just now, but for as long as she's living, you're going to have to go visit her. But I thought that was so insensitive, and in his mind, he was giving me a break.
Right.
He was
because they don't know.
They don't know.
And they're doing the best they can.
And really to listen to you, it wasn't fair of me to be angry about that. But that's just the place that we're in when we're grieving. And now I want to, before we, because this is such deep, and I'm going to ask you right now before we end, because I'm going to invite you back so that we can continue our conversation, because this is so good and so helpful. And I want to, my mission for this podcast is that I speak with people that maybe some of them will make us laugh and feel good. Some conversations might make us feel a little uneasy, but more importantly, give the audience something that will make them think, and even more so, make an impact on their daily lives. Now, I want to talk about how did you move? Y'all ladies, I got to get to this question, because she said, don't y'all forget what she said. She said, I am a caregiver, but I am also a woman and a wife, and she balanced that. So you gave me a guideline, some questions asked, and I told you I'm very unscripted. But one that jumped up, left off the page, I did not expect to see it, was your number 4. How to open up to sex and intimacy again after not dating anyone since 1992 and find true love again online in just 6 months. How in the heck? What did folks say to you about that one? Because I know that probably blew their minds. How did you?
So it's the last chapter in my book, which is The Bad Widow Guide to Life After Loss, Moving Through Grief to Live in Love Again. And basically, that was the hardest thing. It felt like the biggest betrayal of my husband to open up to love again. So my head knew he was gone, that I wasn't betraying anyone because he wasn't here to betray. But my body and my heart did not know that. And so every time I felt desire, every time I looked in someone's direction, I felt like I was betraying my husband. How dare I love again is how it felt. So it was really confusing.
Whoa. You know what, guys? I'm going to end here. I'm going to pause, and then we're going to pick up and we're going to make this a part 2. I'm going to end here, and I want to come right back where you just said, how dare I fall in love again? I felt like I was betraying my husband. So guys, I'm stopping it there because I don't want my producer to kill me. So we're going to end here. And I want to thank Miss Allison so far, because we're going to pick this conversation back up. Miss Allison, thank you so much for doing the first part. Hang on. I'm going to close. You guys, thank you for joining me on the porch once again. It is always my pleasure, and has always be a blessing and be blessed. That is my prayer for you. So thank you for joining me right now on this porch. Come back next week.